Winter in the garden. Everything sleeps. The serpent curls around the roots of the apple tree, which is bare. The leaves have not gone, but have changed into thought. Last year's apples lie under a bed of snow. In spring, they'll rise into the branches again. Meanwhile, they dream. Sometimes of the legendary chunk of apple carried down to earth in Eve's stomach, though the real meaning of fallen eludes them. In jobless towns along the US-Mexico border, 80% of the young men want to be hired assassins. What can Eden find to compare to this? Wanting to lead some kind of life while it's still possible. Maybe the blaze of sun across the snow. Maybe that. But not the drip, drip, drip of the melt as paradise wakens. Not the bright sky. Nothing that has not had to die. So the epigraph for this poem is from the philosopher Theodore Adorno, and he writes, "Natural beauty shares the weakness of every promise with that promise's inextinguishability." And the poem title is Oranges for Adorno. Large poured, swaddled in pith, they swell in the Andalusian heat. Each tree has promised itself right up from the ground, branches full of dying suns, fallen soldiers, purveyors of false hope, as though, having let go the branch, one could yet hang from it, uneaten. But wasps chew at the rinds, determined that no fruit will go unforaged. So the longed-for apotheosis comes to naught. Unless we count the lives of insects as our own, which we may do, bound together as we are. To say it otherwise, what if time were indeed a god? And if all who live have their part in its immortality, wearing its groove deeper with their passing, each scarred and bitten communicant. Pick the orange, scour the rind, eat and feel its sugars spike your bloodstream. Its fate both fulfilled and open-ended, a promise carried forward in you, ever incarnate. The invention of beauty. The swan especially doesn't seem real anymore. So we ignore his arched neck, beckoning, inviting us to slip off the noose, asking us to swoon like we used to, as he glides undialectically along, dipping his sovereign head into the mirror and emerging again, unchanged, unfathomed, trailing past in invisible quotation marks, as if hundreds of versions of himself didn't float in his wake, a raft of platitudes, as if he were truly just a single swan a-swimming on a sunny summer's day. Fear of wasps. He tried to explain it to me, how his friend fell off his bike and broke his clavicle after a wasp flew up his shirt and stung him repeatedly, continuing to sting him even after he had fallen into the ditch and lay in the dirt howling, while my friend laughed at him, doubled over, reaching out half-heartedly, but too weak to clasp his friend's outstretched hand. The story told me almost nothing about wasps, but his failure to grasp his friend's hand puts me in mind of Adam's finger, almost but not quite touching God's. And perhaps the wasps are somehow the embodiment of the space between those two hands, that inch of not being. They are the gap my friend fears in the world. Flying zeros, buzzing nihilists. Their carrion-loving bodies a lacuna carried from one day into the next. It's not a fear of being stung, but of being stung and reaching out and finding nothing there. For he loved his friend, but despised him in equal measure. And the gap between these things he cannot account for. The epigraph for this poem comes from the Bible, from the story of Martha and Mary. So it comes from Luke, and the epigraph is, "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things." And the title of the poem is My Name. He said it twice. Martha, Martha. That made it easy. I understood. Listen, hear how his voice drops, deepens the second time. Martha. As though he were laying something down, something he'd taken from me, which was too heavy for me, too heavy for him as well. If a name spoken once is a claim, twice is the claim undone. Twice is love. They said he could walk on water. I believe that now. I wanted to speak his name, but hadn't the strength. That's why, since he left, I cannot go about my work. I stand in the kitchen reciting pairs of names. Fish, fish, fork, fork, stone, stone, spider, spider. Trying to match the timbre of my voice to his, so the thing named settles, so my troubles subside, and he too comes to rest. Lord, Lord. The Dead. This morning, the obdurate golden-green grass, blurred with dew, buried in the house's shadow. Deer, their faces softened by sleep, raise their heads and look through you, draining you of motive. You become as still as they are, waiting, as though under it all lurked another, more comprehensible world, carrying itself so slowly as to go unnoticed. What if the dead don't leave? Not exactly. What if instead they're what orients you? The sixth sense that turns you this way and that, tilts your face toward the light. What if they are the light? That would explain, wouldn't it, the strange clarity after someone dies. The peculiar radiance things acquire, even the least of them. Your loss everywhere transformed. Your suffering grown impersonal, self-sufficient. Each item buzzes with the vibrancy of the one who's gone. An inherited light that is no longer his or hers, that only you still recognize. So every time you close your eyes, something of that person leaves again. Let's be clear about the stillness you felt in the deer this morning. And yes, you're still staring, still feel the lukewarm glass against your forehead, as you think of the dew and of the grass and of the deer themselves, now vanished from the lawn. It had nothing to do with the dead. The dead don't stop with their hearts in their throats. To die is not to wash through the body of a deer like a ghost. It isn't to skulk under a living skin. It's a change in the value of things. There's no such thing as the dead. When the dead die, they don't hold anything back. Otherwise, a bitterness, like the sediment in wine. It's pure alchemy. The world pours itself into the vessel of the new day, and the liquid runs clear. And that's what hurts. The clarity. It leaves you staring out the window, wondering what to forgive. The lawn more beautiful than it should be. The blades of grass all bent one way, silvered and utterly coherent, like a mirror with no face in it.